Hey there, and welcome to this little training here where we are going to be talking about all things related to intuitive eating. We're going to be talking about what intuitive eating is and some of the pros and cons associated with it. And then I am going to walk you through 7 top tips to get from the point where you may be at right now, which is counting calories, monitoring all that sort of stuff, through to someone maybe who is adopting this intuitive eating approach, especially if it sounds like the thing that you've been searching for. So let's get straight on with it, but I will say this. Now, if you want more information on how to live a leaner, healthier life and get started on your own transformation journey, then you can click the link in the notes, which will take you to download my free Lean Life Kickstarter program, which has got a free training program in it, a nutrition guide, professionally created recipe packs, and much, much more. So obviously, if you like what you hear here, then I would suggest you go forth and download that. But for now, we're going to jump straight on and talk about intuitive eating. Now, what is intuitive eating? Is this just another dieting approach that is sent to confuse you and sent to maybe kind of just get you all het up about a process which actually really doesn't work? Now, in terms of intuitive eating, again, when we're talking about calorie deficit or calorie maintenance, or we're talking about calorie surplus, all the same rules still apply. It's just a technique. It's a method to help you adhere to that principle. So if you are someone who is looking to lose weight, drop body fat, then a calorie deficit is still the way you're going to do it. However, intuitive eating might be an approach you want to take. It might not, but we're going to come on to that later. So intuitive eating is all about basically stripping things back to your natural hunger and your natural fullness cues within your body. So over time, we've basically got this whole system within our bodies that tells us when we're hungry, tells us when we're full. And intuitive eating is about getting in tune with those cues. So when you're hungry and genuinely hungry, not just bored as fuck at work, or you're just looking around and you can see some snacks, so you start to trough out, that's not really intuitive eating. That's just eating like a moron. Now, it's a case here that you've got to kind of get in touch with what those hunger cues are and really kind of then eat when you are genuinely hungry. And then in terms of actually going through the process of eating, it's more about being mindful about what you eat and how you eat, so that when you feel full, you stop. You don't just keep eating because there's a shitload of food on your plate and just kind of working your way through systematically through each stage of a buffet. It's not a competition. This is talking about getting you in tune with those foods. It's also about saying that, foods are unrestricted. So you can have anything. You can have anything you want, as long as, again, you're coming back to being in tune with all of these different cues, the hunger cues and the fullness cues. So really kind of in a positive way is removing any of those negative things associated with certain foods. So no foods are good and no foods are bad, which I fully agree with. Then it really kind of says, well, you can eat what you want, but you've really got to rely on those cues. So you've got to be in tune with them. So this sounds great in theory. It sounds like the nirvana of dieting, like, Simon, I don't get to count calories. I don't have to worry about this, that, and the other. All I do is when I'm hungry, I eat, and when I'm full, I stop eating. Sounds perfect. But as we're going to go through in a second, there are pros and there are cons to this process. So let's start with the cons first. Where is the negative side of this, or potentially the pitfalls? I won't say negative as such. It's the pitfalls that you may fall down along the way. So really, intuitive eating has to be, in my opinion, again, this is my opinion, a learned skill. A lot of people will come into a dieting process having tried and failed in the past. They've tried certain different diets. Maybe they've tried keto, intermittent fasting, all of the popular ones out there. Maybe they've even tried boom bod and all that sort of skinny tea crap. You're coming at a point where, from some people coming at a point from desperation, that they've tried everything and they keep failing and therefore they can't achieve the goals that they want to achieve. Some people come from a point of just feeling like they are stuck at square one and it's just nothing that they try actually helps, or that they think that they're eating well, but actually they're putting on weight. And all these different sorts of things can be happening. So there's a vast amount of people out there who really haven't got the level of nutritional knowledge to be able then to go and implement a nutritional approach like intuitive eating successfully from day one. There's a huge amount of pitfalls that you could fall in. Again, intuitive eating is not bad as an approach, but for someone who's just starting out, it can be not a good place to start, in my opinion. And one of those reasons why would be that it's less structured and there's less guidelines. And again, as we'll come on to a second, that actually could be a positive. But for the person who has been struggling for many, many years, many, many months, and can't really shift weight on the scale and can't really drop body fat, not giving them too much structure and too many guidelines can actually be a bit of an issue. They need to, in a lot of cases, find something to follow, even if it just doesn't have to be calorie counting, even just some basic principles of good nutrition, whether that be to have, for example, 200 grams of green vegetables with each of your dinner and your lunch meals, or something like that, that promotes better practices when you're eating and things like that, and changing different habits. To say to someone, well, you can eat whatever you want as long as you're just in tune with hunger now and in tune with fullness. Now, that could be what someone's actual fundamental problem is that they aren't really in tune with what their hunger cues are anymore. They eat when they're bored, they eat when they're emotional. And so therefore, that can be an issue to not give them specific structure to follow. And likewise, a lot of people, including me on this one, have an issue with when they feel full. So we're in a situation where fast food, we live in a fast culture society. You can get on social media within seconds. The Wi-Fi is like everywhere, so everything happens instantaneously within a touch of a button. If you want to search for some weird ass porn, no longer do you have to wait for some shitty dial-up to load that pixel by pixel. You're seeing that random crazy fucking shit come right into your phone screen from milliseconds away. I should know, I've tried. So from that point of view, you've got this whole sort of situation where you're really not in tune with what hunger means, and you're not in tune with what fullness is. And therefore, it's very easy for you to go astray on an intuitive eating style approach. So it's easy for you to overeat on certain foods if you don't have any prior knowledge of calories. So if you don't know what calories are, you don't know how many calories are in certain portions and things like that, it can be very, very difficult for you to then start to pick the right foods that make you feel full without being too calorie dense. And all of these different sorts of things, it can be quite a complex minefield to put someone into from day one on an intuitive eating style approach. So for a lot of people, it's not going to be great in that respect. But I will say this, ultimately, I believe that everybody should be progressing towards an intuitive eating style approach, because no fucker wants to be calorie counting for the rest of their lives. Nobody wants to feel like MyFitnessPal is their most favorite app in the world for the rest of their life. That's not how you want to be. You want to be progressing on a journey. It sounds quite cheesy and quite cliched and quite Insta guru-ish to say, no, it's all about being on a journey. But we are, for want of a better phrase, on this bit of a journey. Some people, it's for a case of you are learning. You're on a journey of learning about good nutrition. So you're coming from a point where you don't know too much about calories. You don't know too much about calorie deficit, how all of that sort of works, good foods, bad foods. You've got all of this information coming at you left, right, and center from Insta gurus. It's absolute horseshit. And you're finding your feet. You're trying to find your way through that crap. You're swimming through a mire of nutritional shit to get through to the truth. So once you start to progress through that and you start to get in tune with, okay, yeah, it's about calories, and then building on that, about food quality, it's about building on, fiber, protein feedings, all this sort of stuff, depending on what your goal is and what's important to you, you're progressing on that knowledge journey, that learning curve of nutrition. Now, ultimately for me is that the end of that nutrition curve should be getting you towards where you can maintain a healthy lifestyle, you can maintain a healthy body weight, you can do all the things that you love, you can eat all the foods you love, and you still stay on track because effectively you've implemented an intuitive eating style approach. And this brings me on to the pros of this process. So really for me, what I said in the cons is actually a pro, and that is the less structure and guidelines. Because once you get to a point where you're happy with your nutrition, you're happy with your body weight and all of these different sorts of things, actually then having less structure and less guidelines takes a weight off your shoulders. You don't have to be thinking about all of these different things all the time. No longer is it a case that, food and dieting is ruling your life. Not that it should anyway, but again, it's much, much less. It's the pressure's off when you're into this sort of process. And then it also helps you to reduce your hang-ups about certain foods, because once you're fully in control of your nutrition and you're really kind of in tune with, when you feel hungry, when you feel full, your ability to manage and maintain your body weight, it really kind of sets the floodgates open to have what you want when you want it, which is pretty cool. And then, like I said before, you get to maintain a healthy diet and body weight without tracking calories, without monitoring calories. Again, it just gives you much more freedom to be normal. Not that anyone who counts calories is abnormal, far from it, but I'm just saying, you can just live that more relaxed lifestyle. It's a cool way to do it. So how do you actually then transition? How do you transition from the guy or the girl who is counting calories right now? How do you kind of get to the point where you're not doing that anymore? Because that might feel a little bit of a scary situation that, especially if you're like a type A personality like me, slightly OCD, then, tracking numbers, feeling like you're on track, knowing you're hitting certain things, tracking everything feels quite comforting. To let all that go and to have free reign can be quite uncomfortable. Now, the first thing I would say is that you don't have to intuitive eat. Of course you don't. You can do it any way you want. If you are the type of person that really just likes tracking because it gives you a sense of control, then cool, go for that. As long as you're not drifting into sort of obsession and sort of like eating disorder territory, then that's absolutely cool. You can do that. You don't have to do this intuitive eating approach. But if you view calorie counting and monitoring calories as a short to medium term objective so that you can get to your longer term goal of achieving that healthy body weight, and then you just maintain it with an intuitive eating style approach, then this is how I would start to facilitate that process. So what I would do is, like, point one is, if you're a beginner, you start real super basic. And that is start to make lifestyle habit changes to your diet that promote you getting towards a calorie deficit and promoting healthier eating, if you want to call it that. And that would be things like I mentioned before, eating a certain amount of green vegetables with your dinner, with your lunch meals. Maybe it's having a portion of protein with each of your main meals. And all of these different sorts of things that are small but achievable habit-based goals that are getting you towards, they're probably making you, without you realizing it, substitute out some high calorie foods and implementing some more lower calorie foods that are highly nutritious as well. So it's a great thing to do. The next thing you want to do is you want to progress potentially to a more structured way of creating a calorie deficit. Now, this is a debatable point. You don't necessarily have to do this. So you can still lose weight, be in a calorie deficit without counting calories. Of course you can. You can do things like intermittent fasting, as long as, again, you are achieving a calorie deficit through that process. But it may help you to count calories so that you get a real appreciation of particularly like portion sizes and things like that, which I'll come on to in a bit. But it helps you understand, okay, like, what does 100 grams of cooked rice actually look like? How many calories are in this, that, and the other? And it helps you to build up that knowledge of nutrition. And then that kind of brings me on to the third point, which is practicing mindful meal planning. And this is about thinking ahead to the food that you want to eat, the meals that you want to eat, whether it's over the course of a day, a week, or a month, or whatever it is that you plan, is that you're making specific food choices that maybe help you to become an intuitive eater. And by that, I mean, again, it's much easier to intuitively eat when you're eating less hugely calorie dense foods. So if your diet is predominantly fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, fresh meat, fresh fish, dairy, all of these sorts of things, you're probably more able to manage your calorie intake more consistently than if you are eating pizza, chips, crisps, all of that sort of stuff all the time. So the more you sort of practice mindfully planning your meals more, then the easier it'll become to transition away. The next point would then be to mindfully eat. So again, as mentioned before, we live in this fast culture where everything's just like guzzled down within seconds. It's a case of, okay, now I'm going to take my time eating my food, because you want to get in tune with that fullness feeling. And you could have potentially helped that process by actually, maybe taking a bite, maybe chewing your food completely before you're taking another one. You can put, say, like your knife and fork down between bites, so they actually, consciously eating that food. It's not just mindlessly shoveling in as much food down your face as you possibly can in the shortest possible time frame. Then I would say the next point, number 5, is all about, like I said before, taking mental notes of portion sizes. So when you're making your meal plans and you're weighing stuff out, don't just mindlessly just weigh it out and then move on. Actually visually look at what it is that you've weighed out, so that you can say, well, okay, I've weighed out, I don't know, 100 grams of rice 150 times this year. I'm really kind of in tune with what 100 grams of cooked rice actually looks like right now. So when you come then to intuitive eating, and maybe the pressure is slightly off in terms of trying to have a specific amount of weight and fat loss consistently, again, it allows you the leeway to get that wrong. You can be up and down on that, which is, again, like a little bit of a point why maybe intuitive eating isn't great early on, because if you're sort of measuring out visually what 30 grams of nuts look like, you can get that wildly wrong. And when you get it wildly wrong, it can be wildly higher in calories, as with something like avocado or any foods like that, which are potentially highly nutritious, but also highly calorie dense. And you can quite easily overeat on those foods and not feel full, and then eat more. And that's kind of where you can get into trouble with this sort of intuitive eating approach. So point 6 then is progress over time. Don't be in a rush to get to this type of approach, especially if you're very, very new to eating healthy and dieting and things like that. Treat this as a more longer term thing, and somewhere where you're learning about nutrition, you're learning about calories, you're learning about your own hunger cues, you're learning about fullness. You're actually achieving results and getting where you want to be, but you're also using it as a learning process to transition away. That's what you need to be doing. And then number 7 is, remember that you're not locked into any way of eating at any point in time. If you go down this intuitive eating approach, it doesn't obstruct you from then reverting maybe a couple of times a year back to calorie counting. So let's say you started off this intuitive eating, you've done it for 6 months and it's going really well. Okay, and at the end of the process, maybe you put on a kilo or 2 and you want to take that off. Cool. So you could switch back to a calorie counting process or another method of getting yourself into a calorie deficit, drop those 2 kilos, get back to intuitive eating, and then away you go. So you can kind of switch between these different modes. And that's something that I personally do. So I intuitively eat pretty much year round. However, if I specifically want to drop some body fat, I will then just switch to calorie counting for maybe an 8-week process, and then I'll flip back to intuitive eating again. And you can just have that flexibility. So that's what I would say on intuitive eating: the 3 pros, the 3 cons, and then the process of how to transition from beginner through to intuitive eater. So hopefully you found this little bit of training useful. If you did, come and let me know. You can basically come and chat to me on Instagram. That's where I hang out the most, at iron_paradise_fitness. And if you want more information about nutrition and you want to get started, then I recommend you download that Lean Life Kickstarter pack, which I mentioned at the start, and the link is in the notes as well. But until then, I will say keep living the lean life, and I'll see you soon.